Hello, everyone. Happy Monday. Thank you for joining us again. A new episode of Maximize Monday. Whether you're watching us, whether you're listening to us, we appreciate you taking some time out of your day to hear what we have to say about the crazy world of recruiting, hiring, job searching that's going on right now. So, I have a new guest with me this week. I have Kristina, who has taken some time out of her busy schedule to join me. Kristina, thank you so much for jumping on here to discuss the creative recruiter and what you do for the candidate experience.
For sure. Thank you. Hello to everyone who listens. I'm excited.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you're familiar with the show, you know we always kind of start off in terms of talking about what's going on for us for the week ahead. So what's motivating me this week? So the first thing and the craziest thing, my niece is graduating this Thursday. This will be my first niece that has walked across the graduation aisle. So I'm old for starters, but I'm excited to see this for her. She's been very much looking forward to doing this. She's going to school in the fall then for social work, so she's very excited to get this started. So I'm really excited that I get to be there and watch her walk. I don't know how big the graduating class is, but I think it's pretty big, so it'll be a long evening for me. But still, nonetheless, looking forward to being a part of that crowd. In terms of sports, what's exciting me this week? So, if you're local to the Central PA area, you know the Hershey Bears are doing their thing in the Calder Cup, and what a fine time for me to jump on the bandwagon. So I have zero ties to the team, but my friends are going, so I was like, yeah, sure, I'll attend the game with you. So I will be totally out of place. I know not too much about the team in general, but I know the sport enough that I can follow along and be excited for a local team to do well. And the third thing that's motivating me this week, if you're in the Northeast, you know that this past week was kind of rough for us. We didn't really get to leave the house too much because of the air quality. So that's kind of motivating me in general. Is just like I can open a window and walk outside and be able to take my daughter to the park and do those things that you take for granted until it's like, hey, you should not go outside type of situation. And then it's like, oh, well, now I'm trapped in this house. And even though we are in our house and we have no issues with it, usually it's if you can't leave, then it kind of gets panicky. So looking forward to doing some outdoor activities this coming week as the weather gets nicer. So goals for the week ahead. So the first thing, I have a presentation to deliver to some of our HR members on social media recruiting. So that's one of the things that I like to do is if I'm going to be teaching on it, just kind of upping my game myself. So making sure that I'm still consistently posting, giving some examples of what I do, how I recruit through social media, and giving that to the other HR managers around the nation here. And then the other thing, I have a new intake call set for Monday. So just being able to follow up with, get that position posted on all our job boards and make sure that we're getting a steady influx of candidates for that one as well. And then my win from the week before, we had an offer go out for an open position in maintenance manager, and we had the offer accepted. So always a big win when you can fill one of those, especially in a competitive industry, competitive market. So that's the big win for me. That's what's going on in my week this week. Kristina, what do you have going on your end?
Yes, if you need any recruiting support on those open jobs, this is me plugging you.
Yeah.
So I did write down a couple motivators. I have some upcoming long weekend trips with family. My cousin has his kid's first birthday party in Massachusetts. I'm visiting my best friend in Roanoke, Virginia. So like just getting through very like full weeks to get to those family friend outings is always really nice for me. I'm gonna steal yours. The weather, it's just been so unpredictable with if we can go outside, if we can't go outside. I happen to live by the beach, so like it's been even rougher because it has been decent to like take a walk by there, and I just haven't been able to because the weather's been crazy. It's been really smoky, so
Yeah.
I'm excited, and that's definitely a motivator. And also I have like a couple of social media handles just for my recruiting coaching business, and I'm just excited to test out some new ideas that I've seen people do, that I've thought of myself. So always trying to like kind of stay on trends, but also make it authentic so people don't think I'm faking it too much. I hate it when I see people jumping on the bandwagon and it looks like they don't feel comfortable doing those things. So it's like trying to find the balance. I think in terms of goals, because this past week we haven't been able to go out, I usually do like really long walks in between my calls just to like listen to a podcast or just get my mind off things. So I'm looking forward to getting to that next week because it does balance my day a lot.
Yeah.
Um, And then when it comes to email marketing content, just for my professional goals, I was away for a trip for a couple of weeks and I kind of fell off on it. And I wrote all my like subscribers back when I returned, and I didn't realize that people actually cared that I wasn't emailing them for 2 weeks. I was like, no one's going to care, no one's going to notice, and they
Right.
actually did. So I'm excited to and one of my goals is just to create more educational content around that email series, but also anecdotal stuff like wins from former clients, or spotlighting a candidate that is looking for a new job, that is a really, talented person. So I'm excited to do that. And my win from this past week, I worked with a senior copywriter for one of my programs is 4 weeks. And she finished the program about a month ago, and she texted me yesterday saying that she got like her dream job, making almost double than what she was making in a job that she really didn't like. And it's in a setting that she never thought she could enter. She was coming from the brand side. She wanted to work in an advertising agency. So I'm just really hyped for her, because sometimes I work with people and like I never know what happens if the program ends or if our time ends. And
Mhm.
she was someone who kept me updated, and I'm just really pumped. It's always nice to hear that stuff. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's been a good week.
It's nice in recruiting, those wins are triple wins for us because we get to close out the position, they get the job they really want, and the hiring team gets an awesome candidate that they're really pumped to get started with. So everybody wins, and it's always like one of those
Sure.
things where it's like you look at it that way, and it's more than one win each time you close one of those out.
Yep. And it's a tiny little miracle every
Yeah,
time.
for sure. Sure. So
Agreed.
one of the reasons I reached out to you, and I like to get people with different voices in the recruitment industry on here, is you've been doing this for some time now. And, for anyone that got into recruiting, it's usually one of two paths. Either they knew they wanted to get into the hiring end, or they just kind of fell into it. So for you, how did that start? What was it that got you into recruiting, and with the industry itself, especially right now being as crazy, as hectic as it is so competitive, what kind of keeps you motivated to stay within the recruitment industry and work within this position?
Yeah, so it was the latter. I did not grow up thinking I wanted to be a recruiter. I didn't even know what that was. And I was, for 4-ish years, I worked at an event production agency, and I knew it wasn't long term for me. I was interviewing for a lot of the same jobs because I thought, okay, if I've done this, I just have to continue doing the same thing. And after lots of interviews that just I wasn't excited about, talking to friends, talking to people who I respected the opinion of, I kind of learned that in order to find the next job, it's not just doing what you used to do, it's identifying skills that you really like, skills that you're really good at or that you want to get better at, and then seeing what jobs align with those interests and skills. And after a while of thinking about it, reflecting, talking to people, I found recruiting. It was a very happy accident. I was super nervous because it was very new, and I was joining a staffing agency, which is a sales-based, commission-based job. And you're always taking a risk when you try something new, but this was also a sales-driven job. And I never had a positive connotation of sales until I started doing it and
Right.
selling something I actually backed. So it was a very happy accident. And I'm just so happy that I decided to take that leap, because it wasn't something necessarily everyone agreed with. I didn't fully feel confident about, but I knew there was something there. And that's kind of how it all happened. And to answer the second part of your question, I have been in recruitment now for like roughly 7 years. I worked at that staffing agency that I transitioned to for a lot, maybe 4.5. And born out of COVID, I kind of decided that recruiting for me wasn't enough. So I transitioned to doing both recruiting and coaching.
Mm.
Um, and not to talk about coaching too much, but just the balance of being able to help job seekers, but also help hiring managers fill jobs. There's a nice like symbiotic like balance of, okay, there are job seekers out there that are talented, they just don't know how to package their experience, how to interview well. And if I can help them do that, then ultimately I'm going to be helping the hiring managers I work with, even ones that I don't work with. I'll hopefully be helping more companies hire great people. So the balance of having both is nice, because sometimes coaching clients turn into candidates that I send to jobs, or even hiring managers that I work with on future jobs. And vice versa. Sometimes I source candidates, it doesn't work out for them. They're like, hey, you're a coach, can you help me?
Mhm.
And it's just a really nice relationship to have. And it's been very rewarding. Very just something I never expected, but I really do love.
Yeah, absolutely. So within the role that you play as a career coach, there's a lot of misconceptions about that. And in terms of both sides for you now, since you're recruiting and coaching, so how do you try to temper those expectations when you're doing those calls, either whether it's with a candidate who's going to say, I'm hiring my career coach, I will have a job in 2 weeks, and going to a hiring manager, they're saying, I'm working this recruiter and I'm going to have a new person in this position by next Friday. So what does that look like for you, since you're kind of having to do it on both sides, and making sure that everyone's kind of aware of your process and the steps that you take to make sure you're either finding the right candidate or the right job?
Right. Good question. I am transparent right from the beginning. I don't like to set people up for their expectations to be disappointed. It's kind of like when you go to a restaurant and the hostess is like, yeah, you'll be seated in 20 minutes and it's 35 minutes and you're like, why did you lie? But then if it's actually 10 minutes, you're excited. So I just try to manage their expectations on all levels, in addition to understanding what they're looking for and really just validating if it's going to take longer, and if so, why is it going to take longer? I think context helps a lot. If you just say, oh, I can do that or I can't do that with no real meat to it, you're
Mhm.
either promising too much or you're under delivering and not really telling them why. So transparency, context, and just doing my best and telling them I'm going to do my best. So for hiring managers, I try to vet, what kind of person are you looking for? What are your non-negotiables, like you need to haves, or stuff that is a preference? And then I tell them how likely it is that I'm going to find that person in whatever amount of time, for the pay that they're paying, for the location that they're looking for the person to be in. And at the very least, I will tell them when they will have submissions from me, which that is something I can control. I can't control how people interview, how quickly they will schedule the interviews, but when they'll start to have talent, that is something I can give them a timeline on based on all that information. The candidate, when I'm helping job seekers, same sort of thing. If they're looking for something that is going to be easily found, I can tell them, you'll find opportunities. I can help you, maybe land an interview or two, but you'll definitely have the tools to find these things in X amount of time. If what they're trying to do is a tougher thing, like if they're pivoting from, I don't know, graphic design to being a project manager, that's a little bit harder. It's not impossible. It's just now we have to reset their foundation with their resume, with their LinkedIn, with their pitch, how they interview, how they answer questions. And that takes longer.
Mhm.
So I'm very honest with them about that. And if people want a quick fix, they're probably not going to want to come to me if they need more than that, because I just don't do things in a halfway, like half-baked manner. I'm going to do my best. I work really fast. I'm very efficient, but I'm not going to promise you something that I know you can't get. So that's typically what I think works the best. And then birds of a feather, right? Like I end up finding people to work with on both ends that we want a common goal, and we'll get that common goal because we work the same way.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Now, I have a large network of transitioning teachers that come to me for advice, because I was a teacher before I got into recruiting. And one of the main questions that I get asked that I'm not really much help on is on the resume side of things, because I look at them all day, but I'm not a resume writer. I'm not a resume crafter. I was an English teacher, so I can tell you, I can certainly proofread it for you. But beyond that, that's kind of the best I can do. So for you, and again, not to give free advice or anything like that, but when people come to you and the resume is the first thing they want to ask you, what are some of the things that you try to break down for them, especially when they're trying to revamp their resume to go from like a teacher to now a career in sales or a career in marketing?
Yeah, I love free advice. This is what people tune in for. So like I'm here for it. I think the first thing you want to do is take a step back and reflect on, what do I like? What do I want to continue doing? Because some people think a resume is a quick fix. You just add the dates of employment, you change, the title to whatever you're doing now, and you slap that on and you send it out. And Sometimes if your resume was great to begin with and you want to do the same exact thing you were doing before, it's all it takes, a quick proofread, making sure everything looks good, it's readable, legible, whatever. But if what you're trying to do is something slightly different than what you've done, you do need to take a step back and make sure that the context and the direction and the personal branding of your narrative is sound. Because if it's not, you're not going to get picked up at all, because there are so many people competing for the same job now. It's a remote world. Candidates have more options, but that means so do companies. So I have a worksheet that I send to candidates that are just at a crossroads of like what to do with their experience moving forward. And essentially what they need to figure out is like, what do I like doing that is something related to what I've done? And then what are the highlightable moments of what I've done? So showing and telling. I think a good resume has a balance of responsibilities and buzzwords, but also personalizing them, adding examples of how they've done what they've done, whether it is metric based and it's percentage based, or it's something that is qualitative, like they did the first ever of something, or they managed a team that did something really great. So I think that part just needs to happen, especially if they're looking to pivot. But outside of that, I think making sure everything's chronologically, it makes sense, it matches to their LinkedIn profile. LinkedIn is a huge way that recruiters find talent, especially in my industry, and in lots of others. I'm sure I've seen a ton of jobs out there that are outside of creative and marketing and all of that. So making sure it all aligns, trying to address any gaps, even if you do have a gap, if you took a career break, if you became a parent for the first time, if you were a caregiver, explaining that and kind of, just not feeling like you have to justify it, but giving it context. Any sort of skills, like if you work with certain programs or tools that are very essential to doing the job that you want to do, I would include that. Obviously contact information, you don't have to include your address anymore. I think actually you probably shouldn't. So just basic stuff. And lastly, personalizing it in some way, I think is cool. And it does make sense in my industry. And it doesn't have to be, I don't think it should be like your horoscope sign and things like that. But sometimes the thing that gets people interested in you is something that has nothing to do with your 9 to 5. Like if you include stuff you do in your spare time or hobbies, or if you like to travel, places you've traveled to. I have a fun fact section in my resume that I use as a model to share with candidates as like a way of doing it. So it just depends on your preference level and your comfort levels. But I think personalizing it in a way where you're doing that, or adding a pop of color, or creating a logo mark, I think that could be cool as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely. So one of the other services that I saw that you offer, and I wanted to ask you about, is the interview guidance, because that's another overwhelming part of the hiring process, especially for people who have been in their careers for so long, they haven't been on an interview in 5, 10 plus years. So, they send out the applications. It's a lot of waiting, hoping for feedback, things like that. They get to the interview portion, and then it's almost like they get psyched out because they got to this stage. Now, what do I do? I haven't been in this seat. And interviewing for a teaching position, a sales position, a creative director position, these are all so very different too. So how do you try to manage the expectations for the people that you work with and get them prepared for the various interviews that they're going to be a part of?
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, I try to remind them that like if the company didn't want to meet with them, they would not be meeting with them. Nobody does anybody favors like that anymore. If they have their pick of the litter now, they can choose anybody to talk to and interview with. So if they picked you, there's a reason. And I think just reminding yourself that in the beginning helps boost your confidence levels, because it's not a participation trophy. Like they did select you for a purpose. So that's something I like to remind them of right in the beginning. And then moving forward, I think just understanding the round of interviews that they're in. If it's the first round, it's a lot of personality, culture questions, very basic stuff. Why are you interested in this role or this company? Tell me about yourself. What makes you a good fit? Stuff like that. It doesn't get too nitty gritty. So trying to prepare them to not only answer with a little bit of context and also in a very concise way, but linking it to the job or company. So not just saying, oh, I do XYZ, this is what I just did. you want to link it to the job or company to show them that you see the connection and you want them to do the same. And also, if it gets into later rounds and it is more just detailed questions around how they do what they've done, providing examples of the previous positions they've held and similar just achievements or responsibilities, coming to the table with like at least 1 to 2 tangible examples of how they've done what they've done. So if the job is in training or onboarding, a teacher has trained probably a ton of people to do their job, to do other jobs on a software, on a program, on a process. So coming to the table and providing that story. I think that goes a long way versus just saying yes or no.
Yeah.
It really, you need to be the one to advocate for yourself, because otherwise they're never going to know what you did and no one else is going to do it for you. So that's a lot of what I try to tell them, like providing context and coaching them on just not getting caught up in the details of it, but more like, what was the objective or challenge? How did they overcome it? And what were the results of that? And trying to make it concise, because if you get too rambly, people start to doze off and you don't want that. And lastly, asking questions. Always, always, always ask questions. I know the pendulum has swung more in the company's favor at this point, but at one point it was the opposite. Candidates had their choices. So at any rate, you want to interview the company just as much as they're interviewing you. I think if you act like you're something to be sought after or courted, they will act as such as well. And they'll be happy to answer your questions. There are plenty of questions to ask, but making it a little bit informative and educational, but also personalizing the questions to the interviewer and asking them, what's kept you here? Like what you just asked me. People like talking about themselves most of the time, at least a little bit. So never, ever, ever leave an interview without asking questions. And if there's no time at the end and they've run out of time and it's not your fault and you wanted to ask questions, you can always pop them into a thank you note so that they know you were planning on asking them that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That's great advice. And then the other thing I wanted to touch on, and we talked about this prior to the start of the recording, was the cover letter aspect. And you have that as one of the services as well. So as someone who I always appreciate when they're included, they're very rarely mandatory. So when they are, I understand, the point of them, but usually when I see them, I read them. So I tell people who ask, should I include a cover letter? I've never heard of anyone that had their chances hurt by including one. So what is your mindset on that? Are you commonly encouraging your candidates to include one, or is it kind of on a situational basis?
Yeah, I think you're one of the only hiring managers I've heard tell the truth that they do enjoy reading them and that they actually read them, because I've heard, I don't know if it's my industry, I don't know if it's the people I've worked with, but I've heard that other things go a further way for hiring managers. And I think it's subjective, right? I don't think it's like one thing or the other. But I try to tell candidates that if it obviously is a requirement, or if they feel very compelled to tell that company something that the resume or LinkedIn is not telling them, then you should have a cover letter to just tell that story if the resume is just not including those details. And when it comes to the cover letter, I have a template that I help them just kind of work through, but I think you have to personalize it in a story-based creative way. So when I coach candidates on writing cover letters, I'll say, like, what's something that happened to you on the spot, on a job, and how can you tell that story that's not like, hi, so-and-so, my name is blah, 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 and I am a good fit for, and you're just reiterating your resume. Nobody's going to read that. But if you maybe start it with a really random quote or a really just specific moment that requires them to continue reading, then that would be probably more intriguing. I also tell them not only to include some sort of personal story, but to tie that story into why they're interested in the position or why they're a good fit for the role. And also to kind of round that out, pointing to certain skills or details or like examples within their history that exemplify and bring to life what they're saying. And should be very short. I usually tell people to write a 1-page cover letter, tiny little like 2 to 3 sentence intro with that story. And with the details or skills that they're highlighting, whether it's 2 or 3, which I think is a good amount, I tell them to bullet point them because it makes it easier for people to read. And some people just don't have the time to read chunky paragraphs. And if you only have their attention for like 30 seconds to 60 seconds, you
Right.
want to make sure they're picking out as much as they can. So the bullet points have helped in the past with me. And I think bolding certain items or italicizing or underlining, not going crazy with it, but making sure if they see nothing else, I know they're going to see this.
Yeah.
That I think is helpful. Just getting them to read it more. It's kind of like a piece of marketing collateral. Now we have to try our best to like get them to read anything. And that's, I think, the best way to do it. So I try to tell them that there is a point to the cover letter as much as people don't see it, obviously.
Sure. Absolutely. Well, Kristina, I appreciate you taking the time to jump on here and give some fantastic advice to the job seekers. Before I let you go here, I know you mentioned some pages that you're running, things that pertain to your business. So, take the time, tell people where they can find you, how they can connect with you and touch base with you for the services that you offer for their career search.
Thank you. So on Instagram and TikTok, I'm still getting used to TikTok. I am 34 and I feel like 84. But it's That Creative Recruiter. That's the handle for both. And for my LinkedIn, if anybody wants to connect with me, send me a message. Every intro call I take with candidates is 100% free, 30 minutes over Zoom. It's my first and last name, which I'm sure will be published, but it's Kristina Cappuccilli. I'm not going to spell it. You can see it, but it's my name. It's not That Creative Recruiter. It's my personal LinkedIn.
All right, perfect. Well, we appreciate the time you took to jump on here. Hope everyone who's watching, listening has a great week ahead, and we will see you next Monday.
Thank you.